The morning sun cast long shadows across Dusty Creek's main street as Samuel Loner McKenna guided his weathered horse toward the town square. At 43, Samuel carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little. His steel-gray eyes surveyed the bustling crowd gathering for the monthly cattle auction, the same faces he'd observed from a distance for the past 5 years. Mayor Harrison Blackwood stood on the makeshift platform, his polished boots gleaming despite the dusty surroundings. At 55, Blackwood commanded respect through wealth and political connections, his silver mustache perfectly groomed even in the frontier heat. Beside him, Sheriff Tom Bradley adjusted his badge nervously, his weathered face showing the strain of keeping peace in a town where secrets ran deeper than the nearby creek. "Hi, how are you? Sorry to interrupt your story, but what I'm going to ask you is really quick, and it will really help the channel to grow and create new stories. Just click below the video image to subscribe. You'll be doing an act of kindness and encouragement to those who are just starting out. Thank you very much, and continue with your story now and have a great day." "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwood's voice boomed across the square, "today we auction the remaining property of the late William Hartwell. As you know, poor William met his unfortunate end last month, leaving behind debts that must be settled." Samuel dismounted, tying his horse to the hitching post near Martha Henley's general store. The 60-year-old shopkeeper watched him with curious eyes, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She'd always wondered about the mysterious cowboy who appeared monthly, bought supplies with few words, and disappeared back into the wilderness. Dr. Jonathan Pierce, the town's physician, stood near the platform with his medical bag, his kind eyes scanning the crowd. At 48, Pierce had dedicated his life to healing, though some wounds in Dusty Creek seemed beyond his reach. Nearby, Reverend Michael Stone clutched his worn Bible, his 35-year-old face bearing the weight of too many confessions and too few absolutions. The auction began with livestock, cattle, horses, and farming equipment. Samuel observed silently, noting how Jacob Morrison, the wealthy rancher, bid aggressively on the prime cattle. Morrison's cold blue eyes and calculating demeanor had earned him respect and fear in equal measure. His foreman, Buck Williams, stood behind him like a loyal shadow, his scarred hands resting on his gun belt. As the afternoon wore on, the crowd grew restless. The heat was oppressive, and dust swirled with each gust of wind. Elena Rodriguez, who ran the town's small cantina, offered water to the bidders, her dark eyes reflecting concern for the community's growing tensions. "Next item," Blackwood announced, consulting his papers. "The Hartwell homestead itself, 40 acres of prime grazing land." But before he could continue, a commotion erupted near the platform. A small figure darted between the legs of the crowd, naked and terrified. The boy, no more than 7 years old, scrambled onto the auction block, his wide brown eyes darting frantically across the sea of faces. The crowd fell silent. Women gasped, covering their children's eyes. Men shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to react. The boy's thin frame bore evidence of hardship: dirt-stained skin, tangled dark hair, and the hollow look of someone who'd known hunger and fear. "Where did he come from?" whispered Mrs. Catherine Wells, the schoolteacher, her hand pressed to her chest in shock. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward hesitantly. "Now, son, where are your folks? How did you get here?" The boy remained silent, trembling as he pressed himself against the auction podium. His eyes searched the crowd desperately, as if looking for someone who would never come. "Someone must know this child," Dr. Pierce called out, moving closer. "Has anyone seen him before?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but no one stepped forward. Samuel watched the scene unfold, his jaw tightening as he observed the townspeople's reactions. Some showed genuine concern, but others displayed discomfort, even annoyance at the disruption. "Well, we can't just stand here all day," Morrison grumbled. "The boy's probably a runaway from one of the traveling families. Sheriff, deal with this so we can continue." "Now hold on, Jacob," Reverend Stone interjected. "This child needs help, not dismissal." The Reverend's right, Dr. Pierce added. The boy appears malnourished and frightened. He needs immediate care. But as the debate continued, Samuel noticed something others missed. The boy's eyes had found him in the crowd, and there was recognition there, not of Samuel himself, but of something familiar. The way the child held himself, the shape of his features, the defiant tilt of his chin despite his fear. Mayor Blackwood cleared his throat impatiently. Sheriff Bradley, please remove the child so we can proceed. The Hartwell property needs to be sold today. Remove him to where? Dr. Pierce demanded. We don't even know who he is or where he belongs. The county orphanage in Millfield, Blackwood replied curtly. They'll sort it out. Samuel knew about the Millfield orphanage. He knew about the conditions there, the overcrowding, the children who disappeared into lives of servitude or worse. He'd seen too many young souls broken by institutions that claimed to help. As Sheriff Bradley approached the boy with obvious reluctance, Samuel made his decision. He stepped forward, his boots echoing on the wooden platform as he climbed up. I'll take him. The words cut through the crowd's chatter like a blade. Every eye turned to Samuel, surprise and confusion evident on their faces. You? Blackwood sputtered. Mr. McKenna, you barely speak to anyone in this town. What possible interest could you have in a stray child? Samuel knelt beside the boy, his voice gentle but firm. What's your name, son? The boy looked up at him with those wide brown eyes, and for a moment Samuel saw something that made his chest tighten. The child's lips moved silently, forming a single word. Help. Standing slowly, Samuel faced the crowd. The boy needs care, not an institution. I have land, resources, and time. I'll see to his welfare. This is highly irregular, Mayor Blackwood protested. We don't know anything about this child's background or your qualifications to— My qualifications? Samuel's voice carried a dangerous edge. I know what it means to be alone and afraid. I know what it means to have nowhere to turn. That's qualification enough. Dr. Pierce stepped forward. Samuel's right. The boy needs immediate care and the orphanage is 3 days' ride. I support this decision. As do I, Reverend Stone added. Christian charity demands we help those in need. But not everyone agreed. Morrison's face darkened with suspicion. What's your real interest here, McKenna? A man like you doesn't suddenly develop paternal instincts. Samuel's gray eyes fixed on Morrison with icy intensity. A man like me? A drifter. A loner who keeps to himself and has no ties to this community. For all we know, you could be connected to whatever brought this boy here. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunfight. Samuel felt the crowd's mood shifting, suspicion replacing sympathy. He'd always been an outsider here, tolerated but never trusted. That's enough, Sheriff Bradley intervened, though his own expression showed uncertainty. Samuel McKenna has never caused trouble in this town. If he's willing to take responsibility for the boy, I see no legal objection. Samuel removed his coat and wrapped it around the trembling child. The boy didn't resist, instead pressing closer to Samuel's protective presence. What will you call him? Martha Henley asked softly. Samuel looked down at the boy, seeing something in those young features that stirred memories he'd tried to bury. His name is Thomas McKenna. The crowd erupted in whispers. By giving the boy his name, Samuel had made a statement that went beyond temporary care. He'd claimed the child as family. Mayor Blackwood's face flushed with anger. This is preposterous. You can't simply adopt a stray child on a whim. I'm not adopting him, Samuel replied calmly. I'm protecting him. There's a difference. As Samuel lifted Thomas into his arms, the boy wrapped small arms around his neck with desperate trust. The gesture wasn't lost on the observing crowd. Some softened by the display of vulnerability, others hardened by suspicion. This isn't over, Morrison muttered, his cold eyes following Samuel as he carried Thomas toward his horse. Dr. Pierce approached them. Samuel, bring the boy to my office. He needs examination and proper clothing. Thank you, Doc. As they walked away from the auction block, Samuel felt the weight of dozens of stares. He'd lived on the periphery of Dusty Creek society for years, content with his solitude. Now, with Thomas in his arms, everything had changed. The boy looked up at him with those trusting brown eyes, and Samuel made a silent promise. Whatever secrets surrounded Thomas's appearance, whatever dangers lay ahead, he would protect this child. He'd failed to protect someone once before. He wouldn't fail again. Behind them, the auction resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. The appearance of the mysterious boy and Samuel's unexpected intervention had planted seeds of suspicion and curiosity that would soon bloom into something far more dangerous. As they reached Dr. Pierce's office, Samuel caught a glimpse of Mayor Blackwood in heated conversation with Morrison and several other prominent townsmen. Their expressions were dark, their gestures agitated. The game had begun, though Samuel didn't yet understand the rules. All he knew was that Thomas's arrival wasn't coincidence. It was the first move in a deadly chess match where the stakes were higher than anyone imagined. The boy in his arms represented more than a child in need. He was a key to secrets that powerful men would kill to protect, and Samuel McKenna had just painted a target on both their backs. 3 days had passed since the auction, and Dusty Creek buzzed with speculation about Samuel McKenna and the mysterious boy. In Dr. Pierce's office, Thomas sat quietly on the examination table, wearing clothes donated by Martha Henley. The child had spoken only a few words since his arrival, but his eyes followed Samuel's every movement with unwavering trust. Physically, he's malnourished but otherwise healthy, Dr. Pierce reported, cleaning his instruments. No signs of serious abuse, though he's clearly been living rough for some time. The concerning part is his silence. It suggests trauma. Samuel nodded, watching Thomas trace patterns on the wooden table with his finger. How long before he might open up? Hard to say. Children process trauma differently. The important thing is consistency and safety. You're providing both. Outside, the morning bustle of Dusty Creek continued, but Samuel noticed the changed atmosphere. Conversations stopped when he passed, and curious glances followed his every move. The town, that had barely acknowledged his existence, now scrutinized his every action. Elena Rodriguez entered the office carrying a basket of warm tortillas and soup. Her kind face showed genuine concern as she approached Thomas. "For the little one," she said softly. "Children need good food to heal." Thomas looked up at her with those large brown eyes, and for the first time since his arrival, he smiled slightly. Elena's face brightened at the small victory. "He likes you," Samuel observed. "Children sense kindness," Elena replied. "They also sense danger. This boy has known both." As if summoned by her words, Sheriff Bradley appeared in the doorway, his expression troubled. "Samuel, I need a word." Dr. Pierce gestured toward his private office. "Use my consultation room." Once inside, with the door closed, Bradley's demeanor became serious. "We've got problems. Mayor Blackwood is asking questions about your background, your right to take custody of the boy. Morrison's been stirring up sentiment against you." "What kind of sentiment?" "The dangerous kind. He's suggesting you might be connected to whatever happened to the boy's family. Some folks are starting to listen." Samuel's jaw tightened. "And what do you think, Tom?" Bradley had known Samuel longer than most in town. He'd seen the man's character during a few tense situations over the years. "I think you're a decent man who saw a child in need. But my opinion doesn't matter if the town turns against you." "What are you suggesting?" "Maybe it would be better if you took the boy to the county authorities. Let them handle it properly." Samuel's gray eyes hardened. "You mean let them ship him off to an institution where he'll disappear into the system? That boy's been through enough. I'm trying to protect you both. There are rumors." "What kind of rumors?" Bradley hesitated. "People are saying the boy's appearance wasn't random, that maybe you knew he was coming. Morrison's even suggesting you might have had something to do with whatever happened to his family." The accusation hung between them like a loaded gun. Samuel felt anger rising, but forced himself to remain calm. "And you believe that?" "No. But belief doesn't matter when a mob gets worked up, and Morrison has influence." Through the window, Samuel could see Jacob Morrison talking animatedly with several townsmen outside the saloon. Their body language suggested heated discussion, and occasional glances toward the doctor's office confirmed the subject of their conversation. "There's something else," Bradley continued reluctantly. "I sent a telegram to surrounding counties asking about missing children. Got a response from Sheriff Davis in Millfield. A family named Hartwell was found dead 3 weeks ago, murdered in their homestead about 50 miles north." Samuel's blood chilled. "Hartwell? Like the property being auctioned?" "William Hartwell's brother Marcus and his family, wife and 2 children. The strange thing is, they only found 3 bodies. The youngest boy, about 7 years old, was missing." The pieces began forming a terrible picture. Samuel looked through the glass partition at Thomas, who was quietly eating Elena's soup under Dr. Pierce's watchful eye. "You think Thomas is the missing Hartwell boy? It fits. The timing, the age, the condition he was in when he appeared. But here's what's really troubling. The Millfield sheriff mentioned something about the murders. They weren't random. Someone was looking for something specific. What kind of something? That's what we need to find out. But Samuel, if this boy's connected to those murders, then whoever killed his family might still be looking for him." The implications hit Samuel like a physical blow. If Thomas was indeed the missing Hartwell child, then his appearance at the auction wasn't coincidence. It was either incredible luck or carefully orchestrated. "There's more," Bradley continued. "I did some digging into the Hartwell property being auctioned. Turns out William Hartwell didn't just die of natural causes like Blackwood claimed. Doc Pierce's records show signs of poisoning, but the mayor insisted on a quick burial." "Poisoning?" Dr. Pierce was suspicious but couldn't prove anything without an autopsy. Blackwood overruled him, citing public health concerns. Samuel's mind raced. 2 Hartwell brothers, both dead under suspicious circumstances. A missing child who appeared at the auction of one brother's property. And Mayor Blackwood seemed to be at the center of it all. "Tom, I need you to keep this information quiet for now. If the wrong people find out what we suspect, they might come for the boy," Bradley finished grimly. "Samuel, you need to understand what you're up against. If powerful people are involved in this, taking that child puts you in mortal danger." "Then I guess I'd better find out who they are before they find me." Bradley studied his face. "You're not going to back down, are you? Would you? If you saw a child who'd lost everything, who had nowhere else to turn?" The sheriff sighed. "No, I suppose I wouldn't. But Samuel, you can't do this alone. If my suspicions are right, you're going to need allies. Who can I trust?" "Dr. Pierce, definitely. Reverend Stone seems genuine. Elena Rodriguez has a good heart. Martha Henley's been around long enough to know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking." "And the ones I can't trust?" "Morrison, obviously. He's been pushing hard for information about you and the boy. Mayor Blackwood's behavior around the Hartwell situation raises red flags. And there are others. People who've been asking too many questions." A knock on the door interrupted them. Dr. Pierce entered, his expression concerned. "Samuel, you need to see this." They returned to the main office, where Thomas sat rigidly on the examination table. The boy's earlier calm had vanished, replaced by the same terrified alertness he'd shown at the auction. "What happened?" Samuel asked. "Buck Williams was just here," Dr. Pierce explained. "Morrison's foreman. He claimed he wanted to check on the boy's welfare, but his questions were specific." "What kind of specific?" "He asked about birthmarks, scars, anything that might identify the child. When I refused to answer, he became aggressive. That's when Thomas reacted." Samuel knelt beside Thomas, whose small hands were clenched into fists. "It's all right, son. He's gone now." But Thomas's reaction told Samuel everything he needed to know. The boy recognized Buck Williams, and that recognition brought terror. Elena, who had remained quietly in the corner, spoke up. "That man, Williams, he was asking questions at my cantina yesterday. About strangers passing through, about the boy. He offered money for information." "What did you tell him?" Bradley asked. "Nothing, but others might not be so careful with their words." Samuel made a decision. "Tom, I'm taking Thomas out to my place. If people are asking questions, getting him away from town might be safer." "That might be wise, Doctor," Pierce agreed. "But Samuel, If you need medical attention for the boy, don't hesitate to send for me." As they prepared to leave, Martha Henley arrived with additional supplies, clothes, food, and a small wooden toy horse. "For the little one," she said gruffly, though her eyes were kind. Thomas accepted the toy with wonder, the first genuine smile Samuel had seen from him. But the moment was interrupted by raised voices outside. Through the window, they could see a crowd gathering in the street. Morrison stood in the center, gesticulating wildly as he spoke to the assembled townspeople. His voice carried through the glass. "Can't just ignore the facts. A strange child appears out of nowhere, and suddenly McKenna, who's never shown interest in anyone, claims him. It's suspicious." Mrs. Catherine Wells, the school teacher, tried to interject. "Mr. Morrison, the child needed help. What Mr. McKenna did was Christian charity." "Christian charity?" Morrison's laugh was harsh. "Or covering his tracks? For all we know, McKenna knows exactly where this boy came from." Samuel felt Thomas press closer to his side. The boy might not understand all the words, but he could sense the hostility in Morrison's voice. Reverend Stone stepped forward from the crowd. "Jacob Morrison, you're making serious accusations without evidence. This is not the Christian way." "Evidence?" Morrison's voice rose. "The evidence is standing right there in that office. A man with no ties to our community suddenly taking in a child who appears under mysterious circumstances? Wake up, Reverend." Sheriff Bradley moved toward the door. "I should break this up before it gets out of hand." But Samuel stopped him. "Wait, let's see who stands where." The crowd was dividing. Some nodded agreement with Morrison's words, while others looked uncomfortable with his aggressive tone. Dr. Pierce and Elena flanked Samuel protectively, while Martha Henley stood in her doorway with arms crossed, glaring at Morrison. Mayor Blackwood emerged from the town hall, his expression carefully neutral. "What's all this commotion about?" Morrison turned to him eagerly. "Mayor, we need to discuss the McKenna situation. The town has a right to know what's really going on with this boy." Blackwood's eyes found Samuel through the window, and for a moment something cold and calculating passed across his features. "Perhaps we should call a town meeting. Discuss this properly." "Excellent idea," Morrison agreed. "Tonight, let McKenna explain himself to the community." Samuel felt the trap closing around him. A town meeting would force him to answer questions he couldn't answer, reveal information that might put Thomas in greater danger. But as he watched the crowd, he noticed something important. Not everyone was buying Morrison's rhetoric. Elena Rodriguez stood with her arms crossed, clearly disgusted by the display. Dr. Pierce had moved to stand visibly in support of Samuel. Even some of the townspeople looked uncomfortable with Morrison's aggressive approach. "What do you think?" Bradley asked quietly. Samuel looked down at Thomas, who clutched the wooden horse tightly. The boy's trust was absolute, his faith that Samuel would protect him unwavering. "I think," Samuel said slowly, "that it's time to find out who my real enemies are." The battle lines were being drawn in Dusty Creek, and Samuel McKenna found himself at the center of a conflict he didn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. Powerful people wanted Thomas, and they were willing to turn the entire town against Samuel to get him. As the crowd outside continued to grow, Samuel made preparations for what might be the most important fight of his life. Not with guns or fists, but with truth against lies, courage against fear, and one man's determination to protect an innocent child against forces that would destroy them both. The town meeting would come, and with it, revelations that would shake Dusty Creek to its foundations. But first, Samuel needed to uncover the truth about Thomas, and about the deadly secret that had already cost 2 families their lives. The evening air crackled with tension as townspeople filed into the community hall. Samuel McKenna sat in the front row with Thomas beside him, the boy's small hand gripping his coat sleeve. Dr. Pierce and Elena Rodriguez flanked them protectively, while Reverend Stone offered quiet words of support from the row behind. Mayor Blackwood called the meeting to order, his silver mustache gleaming in the lamplight. "We're here to address concerns about the child who appeared at our auction and Mr. McKenna's decision to take custody. Jacob Morrison rose immediately, his cold blue eyes scanning the crowd. Mayor, this isn't just about custody. This is about the safety of our community. We have a right to know who this boy is and why McKenna was so quick to claim him. Samuel stood slowly, his gray eyes meeting Morrison's stare. The boy needed help. I provided it. That's all there is to it. Is it? Morrison's voice carried across the hall. Then perhaps you can explain why Buck Williams saw you talking to strangers on the North Road 2 weeks ago. Strangers who matched the description of the murdered Hartwell family. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Samuel felt Thomas tense beside him, and he placed a protective hand on the boy's shoulder. That's a lie, Samuel said calmly, though his mind raced. Morrison was either mistaken or deliberately fabricating evidence. Buck Williams stood from the back of the hall, his scarred face grim. I saw what I saw, McKenna. You were talking to a man, woman, and 2 children. Looked like they were asking directions. Dr. Pierce rose angrily. This is preposterous. You're suggesting Samuel was involved in murder based on a conversation about directions? I'm suggesting, Morrison continued, that McKenna knew this boy was coming, that his appearance at the auction wasn't coincidence. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. That's enough speculation. If you have evidence of wrongdoing, present it. Otherwise, I have evidence, Mayor Blackwood interrupted, producing a folded paper from his coat. A telegram from Sheriff Davis in Millfield. Samuel's blood chilled as Blackwood read aloud. Family of 4 found murdered. Youngest child, Tommy Hartwell, age 7, missing. Suspect may be heading toward Dusty Creek. Exercise caution. The hall erupted in whispers and gasps. Thomas pressed closer to Samuel, his brown, eyes wide with fear at hearing his real name spoken aloud. So the boy is Tommy Hartwell, Morrison declared triumphantly. The question is, how did McKenna know to expect him? Samuel's mind worked furiously. The telegram was real. He could see that in Bradley's expression. But something felt wrong about its timing and content. When did you receive this telegram, Mayor? Samuel asked. Blackwood hesitated for a fraction of a second. This morning. Strange, Dr. Pierce interjected. Because Sheriff Bradley told me he'd been corresponding with Millfield for days about missing children. Wouldn't Sheriff Davis have mentioned the Hartwell murders earlier? All eyes turned to Bradley, who looked uncomfortable. I didn't receive any information about murders. My inquiries were about missing children generally. Perhaps, Reverend Stone suggested quietly, we should ask the boy himself what happened. Samuel felt Thomas tremble. The child had barely spoken since his arrival, and the trauma of recounting his family's murder might be devastating. But before Samuel could object, a new voice cut through the tension. That won't be necessary. Everyone turned to see Martha Henley standing in the doorway, her gray hair disheveled and her usually composed demeanor shaken. In her hands, she clutched a small leather journal. Martha, Dr. Pierce called out. What are you doing here? The elderly shopkeeper walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes fixed on Mayor Blackwood. I came to tell the truth about William Hartwell's death, and about why his nephew appeared at our auction. The hall fell silent. Blackwood's face had gone pale, and Morrison's confident expression wavered. Martha, Blackwood said carefully, you're overwrought. Perhaps you should— I should have spoken up weeks ago, Martha interrupted, her voice gaining strength. But I was afraid of what they'd do to me like they did to William. She held up the journal. William Hartwell came to my store the night before he died. He was terrified, said he'd discovered something that could destroy powerful people in this town. He gave me this journal for safekeeping. Samuel felt the pieces of the puzzle shifting. What kind of discovery? Martha's eyes found his across the room. Land fraud. William discovered that several property sales in the county were based on forged documents. Families were murdered or driven off their land, and the properties were sold to wealthy buyers at fraction of their value. Morrison stepped forward aggressively. That's preposterous. Martha, you're clearly confused. I'm not confused about what I read in this journal, Martha shot back. Names, dates, amounts. The Hartwell brothers weren't the only victims. There were others. The Jameson family, the Rodriguez homestead, the Chen settlement. Elena Rodriguez gasped. My family's original homestead. We were told the previous owners sold willingly. They were murdered, Martha said grimly, just like the Hartwells. And the man orchestrating it all, she turned to face Mayor Blackwood, was sitting right there in the mayor's office. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gunfight. Blackwood's composure cracked, revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. These are wild accusations from a senile old woman, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Samuel stood, pieces falling into place. That's why Tommy appeared at the auction. Someone was trying to get him to safety. His uncle Marcus, Martha confirmed. Before he was killed, he managed to get Tommy away from the homestead. The boy wandered for days before finding his way here. But how did he know to come to Dusty Creek? Dr. Pierce asked. Martha's eyes filled with tears. Because William told his brother about the journal, about the evidence. Marcus was bringing his family here to testify, but they were intercepted. Morrison's face had gone ashen. This is all speculation. You have no proof. I have William's journal, Martha said firmly. And I have this. She reached into her coat and produced a small silver locket. Tommy was wearing this when he arrived. It belonged to his mother, and inside, she opened it to reveal a tiny photograph and a folded piece of paper. Samuel took the locket, unfolding the paper carefully. His expression darkened as he read. What does it say? Reverend Stone asked. Samuel's voice was steady but filled with controlled anger. It's a list of names, people involved in the land fraud scheme, and at the top, he looked directly at Morrison. Jacob Morrison, chief buyer of fraudulent properties. The hall erupted in chaos. Morrison lunged toward Samuel, but Sheriff Bradley intercepted him. That's enough. Jacob Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy and murder. But Morrison wasn't finished. You fools! You think this ends with me? Blackwood's been planning this for years. The whole county government is involved. Mayor Blackwood rose slowly, his hand moving toward his coat. I'm afraid I can't allow this information to leave this room. The metallic click of a gun being cocked silenced the crowd. Blackwood held a small derringer, its barrel pointed directly at Tommy. The boy dies here tonight, Blackwood said calmly, along with anyone who tries to stop me. Samuel stepped protectively in front of Tommy, his own hand moving toward his gun. But Blackwood was ready for that. I wouldn't, McKenna. My associates outside have this building surrounded. One wrong move, and everyone in this hall dies. As if summoned by his words, Buck Williams appeared at the back of the hall with several armed men. The townspeople found themselves trapped between Blackwood's gun and Williams' crew. You see, Blackwood continued conversationally, the land fraud was just the beginning. We've been building an empire, buying up properties across 3 counties. The Hartwell brothers threatened to expose everything. So you had them murdered, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. Business decisions, Blackwood replied without emotion. Just like this will be. But Tommy, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke in a clear, strong voice. My papa said you were a bad man. He said you killed people for money. Blackwood's attention shifted to the boy for just a moment. But that moment was enough. Samuel drew his gun with lightning speed, firing before Blackwood could react. The mayor's derringer discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as he fell, clutching his wounded shoulder. The hall erupted in chaos as Williams's men rushed forward, but they hadn't counted on the townspeople's response. Dr. Pierce tackled one gunman, while Elena Rodriguez struck another with a chair. Even elderly Martha Henley joined the fight, wielding her walking stick like a weapon. When the dust settled, Blackwood and his associates were subdued, and Sheriff Bradley was placing them under arrest. It's over, Bradley announced to the crowd. The corruption ends tonight. Samuel knelt beside Tommy, checking to ensure the boy was unharmed. Are you all right, son? Tommy nodded, then surprised everyone by speaking again. My name is Tommy Hartwell, but can I still be Tommy McKenna, too? Samuel's throat tightened with emotion. If that's what you want, I want to stay with you. You're the only family I have left. Dr. Pierce approached them, his medical bag in hand. Samuel, The boy's been through tremendous trauma. He'll need time to heal. We'll take all the time he needs, Samuel replied, lifting Tommy into his arms. As the crowd began to disperse, Elena Rodriguez touched Samuel's arm. What you did tonight, protecting that boy, standing up to those men, it took real courage. Reverend Stone nodded agreement. You've given this community something precious, the truth, and you've given that boy something even more valuable, a future. Martha Henley approached with tears in her eyes. I should have spoken up sooner. If I had, you spoke up when it mattered, Samuel interrupted gently. That's what counts. As they prepared to leave the hall, Tommy looked up at Samuel with those trusting brown eyes. Are we going home now? Samuel smiled, the first genuine smile many in Dusty Creek had ever seen from him. Yes, son, we're going home. But their journey was far from over. The corruption they'd exposed ran deeper than anyone imagined, and there would be consequences for those who'd profited from it. However, for the first time since Tommy's arrival, Samuel felt hope. The boy in his arms was no longer a mystery to be solved or a burden to be carried. He was family, chosen family, forged in crisis and sealed with courage. As they walked out into the night air, Samuel made a silent promise. He would help Tommy heal from his trauma, teach him to trust again, and show him that even in a world capable of great evil, there were still people willing to fight for what was right. The truth had set them free, but more importantly, it had given them each other. And sometimes, that was enough to change everything. 6 months had passed since the night that changed Dusty Creek forever. The morning sun cast a golden glow across Samuel McKenna's ranch as he watched Tommy Hartwell McKenna practice his reading on the front porch. The boy's transformation had been remarkable, from the terrified, silent child who'd appeared at the auction to a bright, curious 7-year-old who filled the ranch house with laughter. Samuel! Tommy called out excitedly, holding up his primer. I read the whole page without help. Samuel smiled, setting down his coffee cup. That's excellent, son. Mrs. Wells would be proud. Catherine Wells, the school teacher, had been coming to the ranch twice a week to tutor Tommy. The boy had shown remarkable intelligence once his trauma began to heal, and his progress in reading and arithmetic impressed everyone. Dr. Pierce's wagon appeared on the horizon, making his weekly visit to check on Tommy's continued recovery. The physician had become not just a medical advisor, but a trusted friend to both Samuel and Tommy. Morning, Doc, Samuel called as Pierce climbed down from his wagon. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Dr. Pierce replied, his medical bag in hand. How's our young scholar doing? See for yourself. Samuel gestured toward the porch where Tommy was now attempting to read aloud to his wooden horse, the toy Martha Henley had given him that first day. Dr. Pierce smiled. The nightmares? Less frequent. Maybe once a week now, instead of every night. When they do come, he talks about them instead of just crying. That's progress, right? Significant progress. Trauma healing isn't linear, but Tommy's resilience is remarkable. Having a stable, loving environment has made all the difference. As if hearing his name, Tommy bounded down from the porch. Dr. Pierce, want to see my horse? Samuel taught me to brush him properly. I'd love to see that, Dr. Pierce replied warmly. They walked toward the corral where Samuel had been training a gentle mare specifically for Tommy. The boy's natural affinity with horses had surprised everyone, and riding had become both therapy and joy for him. Samuel, Dr. Pierce said quietly as Tommy ran ahead, I have news from the county seat. The trials are finally concluding. Samuel's expression grew serious. The legal proceedings following that night in the community hall had been complex and far-reaching. Mayor Blackwood and Jacob Morrison faced charges of conspiracy, fraud, and accessory to murder. Their corruption network had extended into 3 counties, involving dozens of illegal land transactions. What's the verdict? Blackwood got 25 years in federal prison. Morrison got 20. Most of their associates received lesser sentences, but they're all going away for a long time. Samuel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. And the land restorations? That's the best news. The federal judge ordered all fraudulent sales reversed. Families like the Rodriguezes will get their ancestral lands back. There's also a compensation fund being established for victims' families, including Tommy, especially Tommy. As the sole survivor of the Marcus Hartwell family, he's entitled to significant compensation. The money will be held in trust until he comes of age. Samuel watched Tommy gently stroking the mare's nose, speaking to her in the soft, patient voice he'd learned from Samuel. He doesn't need money to be happy. He just needs to know he's safe and loved. And he has that, Dr. Pierce observed. Samuel, I hope you know what you've accomplished here. You didn't just save a boy's life. You've given him a future. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another wagon. Elena Rodriguez climbed down, carrying a basket of fresh tortillas and a wide smile. Buenos dias, she called out. I brought lunch for my favorite cowboys. Tommy ran to greet her, chattering excitedly about his morning lessons. Elena had become like an aunt to him, and her warm, maternal presence had been crucial in his healing process. Elena, Samuel said, Doc tells me your family's getting the original homestead back. Her eyes filled with tears of joy. Sigh, after 3 generations, we return to our ancestral land. My grandmother's spirit will finally rest in peace. That's wonderful news. It's thanks to you and Tommy, she said firmly. Your courage to stand up to those evil men. It gave us all courage. As they prepared to share lunch on the porch, Sheriff Bradley rode up, his expression more relaxed than Samuel had seen in months. Afternoon, folks, Bradley called out, dismounting. Mind if I join you? I have some news I think you'll want to hear. Of course, Tom, Samuel replied. What's the news? Bradley accepted a cup of coffee from Elena before speaking. The new mayor and town council voted unanimously. They want to rename the main street Hartwell Avenue in honor of the family's sacrifice, and they're commissioning a memorial for all the victims of the land fraud scheme. Tommy looked up from his tortilla. Will it have my mama and papa's names on it? Right at the top, son, Bradley assured him gently. Samuel felt his throat tighten with emotion. The boy's ability to speak about his parents' death without breaking down showed how much he'd healed, but it still moved Samuel deeply. There's something else, Bradley continued. The territorial governor is sending a federal marshal to establish a permanent law enforcement presence in the county. The corruption went so deep that they want to make sure it never happens again. Good, Samuel said simply. As the afternoon wore on, more friends arrived. Reverend Stone came with news that the church was establishing a fund to help other orphaned children. Martha Henley brought a new book for Tommy, a collection of adventure stories that had the boy's eyes lighting up with excitement. You know, Martha said to Samuel as they watched Tommy read to the assembled group, William Hartwell would be proud. His journal didn't just expose corruption. It led to that boy finding a real family. Samuel nodded, watching Tommy's animated face as he read about brave knights and noble quests. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't been at that auction. But you were, Dr. Pierce said firmly. That's what matters. Sometimes fate puts the right person in the right place at exactly the right moment. As evening approached and their friends prepared to leave, Tommy approached Samuel with a serious expression. Samuel, can I ask you something? Of course, son. What is it? Why did you help me that day? You didn't know me, and everyone was saying bad things about you because of it. Samuel knelt down to meet Tommy's eyes, those same brown eyes that had looked at him with such trust from the auction block 6 months ago. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? When I asked your name? Tommy thought for a moment. I said help. That's right. And sometimes, when someone asks for help, really asks with their whole heart, you don't think about the consequences. You just help. But it was dangerous. You could have been hurt. Samuel smiled. Tommy, the most dangerous thing in the world is seeing someone who needs help and walking away. I couldn't live with myself if I'd done that. Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he wrapped his small arms around Samuel's neck in a fierce hug. I'm glad you didn't walk away, he whispered. So am I, son. So am I. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Samuel and Tommy sat on the porch together. The boy was reading by lamplight, occasionally asking Samuel about difficult words. The peaceful scene was a far cry from the chaos and danger of 6 months ago. "Samuel," Tommy said suddenly. "Yes, when I grow up, I want to be like you. I want to help people who need it." Samuel felt his heart swell with pride and love. "You already do help people, Tommy. You helped this whole town by being brave enough to survive, to trust, to heal. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done." Tommy smiled and returned to his book, but Samuel could see the boy's eyelids growing heavy. Soon he'd carry Tommy inside to his bed, the same bed where the boy had spent countless nights learning to feel safe again. As Samuel looked out over his ranch, he reflected on how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a solitary man, content with his isolation and suspicious of human connection. Now he couldn't imagine life without Tommy's laughter filling his home, without the purpose that came from raising a child, without the community of friends who'd rallied around them both. The boy had given Samuel far more than Samuel had given him. Tommy had taught him that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice, commitment, and love. He'd shown Samuel that even the darkest circumstances could lead to light, that courage could triumph over corruption, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with guns, but with compassion. "Samuel?" Tommy's sleepy voice interrupted his thoughts. "What is it, son?" "Tomorrow. Can we ride out to see the new memorial? I want to tell Mama and Papa about my reading lessons." Samuel's voice was gentle. "Of course we can. They'd be very proud of how much you've learned." "And Samuel?" "Yes, I love you." The simple words hit Samuel with the force of a revelation. In all his 43 years, he'd never heard those words spoken with such pure, uncomplicated trust. "I love you too, Tommy. More than you'll ever know." As Samuel carried the sleeping boy inside, he thought about the future they'd build together. There would be challenges ahead. Tommy would need continued healing, education, and guidance as he grew. But they'd face those challenges together, as father and son in every way that mattered. The auction block where they'd first met was now just a memory, but the bond forged that day would last a lifetime. Samuel McKenna had ridden into Dusty Creek as a loner, but he'd found something more valuable than gold or land or reputation. He'd found family, and in saving Tommy Hartwell, he'd discovered that sometimes the person who needs rescuing most is yourself. The stars shone down on the quiet ranch house, where a former loner and a brave little boy slept peacefully, knowing they were exactly where they belonged, together, safe, and home at last. In the months and years to come, their story would be told throughout the territory as an example of how one act of courage could change everything. But for Samuel and Tommy, it wasn't a story at all. It was simply love, the kind that transforms strangers into family and makes heroes out of ordinary people who choose to do what's right, no matter the cost. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all. Hello, how are you? Did you enjoy the story? Like, share, comment on which city you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel to help us continue adding new amazing videos. Thank you very much, and come back often.